Hello and welcome back to the Daily Express's Royal Roundup. We hope your week is going well so far. Well, are you looking forward to the coronation? More plans are underway, so we'll be talking about that this week. Is there anybody that you want to see coming to the coronation, or perhaps somebody that you don't want to see? Let us know what bits are you looking forward to. Obviously, we do have that bank holiday weekend as well as the coronation. We will be talking about Prince Andrew. Now, we have spoken about Prince Andrew on the Daily Express's Royal Roundup before, but there are rumours going round of a memoir. We asked on a poll, which we'll be bringing up within the Royal Roundup, if you just hold on until the end, whether you would buy his memoir if he released one. Let us know in the comments and we can bring those up and discuss them. Obviously, Prince Harry's memoir went down very well, but they're obviously two very different people with very different lives. Now, we've also got that Commonwealth Day service, which does seem quite a while ago now, but it did happen, and it has happened since we last had our Royal Roundup. Kate was in a beautiful, beautiful outfit. She always does look amazing, doesn't she? There she is in Royal Navy. Now, some people did actually do a comparison to a picture of the late Princess Diana in that polka dot dress. Slightly different here, but that does always seem to come up when we see pictures of Kate and she hits the headlines. But what can we expect from the royal family in the next week or so? Well, coronation plans, as I said, are well underway. So we'll be talking all about that, what to expect. I know that there is tomorrow. There he is, the king. So we've got lots to talk about today. And whilst we get the Daily Express's royal correspondent on board, Richard, I think he's just getting that up there whilst we have a couple of technical difficulties. We can bring him on board now. Richard, hello.
Hello, Pandora. I've just come on my phone while I'm rebooting my laptop. We haven't had one of these for a little while, have we? I'd like to keep.
No, we haven't. We haven't. It keeps up. Okay, Richard, now that we have you and I've given the viewers a bit of indication as to what is going on in the next week or so, let's kick things off then with Prince Andrew. Reportedly, this is all rumoured, doing a tell-all memoir. What's this about then?
Well, this is not confirmed at all, and I would be not entirely. I would be surprised, but I wouldn't rule it out completely. I think what this is about actually is the Duke of York and the Sarah Duchess of York and their friends trying to lobby the king for more money for Prince Andrew, and we've seen over the last few months, really, the start of a campaign to resurrect Andrew, or to at least get him some money. And it's hard to get to the bottom of it, but a lot of this seems to be coming from a quite distinguished filmmaker and journalist, Daphne Barrack, who is a friend of Sarah, Duchess of York. And she's been feeding stories to a couple of British Sunday newspapers, which have really fueled the fire with this whole thing. And one of the stories, I mean, it's amazing that it took this long to come out, but Prince Andrew is really under pressure to give up his home, Royal Lodge, 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park, about 3 miles from Windsor Castle, where he's lived for a long time now. I think the early 2000s, and in fact, his ex-wife lives at one end of the house, and he lives at the other. But it's become apparent. I mean, I did a story about this at the weekend. It's become apparent that the house is not in a great condition. It needs quite a lot of work on it. There was a report that it needs a new roof. And there were people telling me for the weekend story that it needs completely repainting. And so it was the Queen Mother's home before it was Andrew's, until her death in 2002. And indeed, it was her sort of Windsor home throughout much of her life. I think the young Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret spent quite a lot of time there when they were younger. And it was painted pink by when the Queen Mother was there. Windsor pink, I think it's known, the colour. And Andrew had it completely redone, painted white. And it just needs doing again. And that alone, I'm told, will cost £1 million just to repaint the front of the house. Wow. So we're talking about major work that needs doing. And as far as we understand it, the King is concerned that Andrew doesn't have enough money to pay for all of this. And as we saw, I think it was last week, possibly the week before, part of the plan in the King's mind is to move Harry and Meghan out of Frogmore Cottage and move Andrew in there. I guess that place is done up already. It's been done quite fairly recently. I mean, we know from the royal accounts that £2.4 million of taxpayers' money was spent doing up Frogmore House. Really, the exterior to make it habitable for Harry and Meghan. They then spent money on the interior. There was further money spent in the following financial year, from what I recall, but not enough for the palace to need to declare exactly how much. There are certain limits. If they spend beyond a certain amount, then they don't have to declare it publicly. So
do you think Andrew is aware of the public opinion on him? Like, would he seriously expect for those damages to be, and I guess wear and tear to be paid for by the taxpayer?
No, I don't think he would expect those monies to be paid for by the taxpayer. It's all, as with every part of royal finance, the lines are blurred and it's all a bit complicated. But there's a difference between Frogmore Cottage, which is part of what's really known as the occupied royal palace's estate, and that is maintained at the expense of the taxpayer. As far as I understand it, Andrew he lives in a house that is owned by the Crown Estate. The Crown Estate owns the freehold. Crown Estate is owned by the King in name only, really. It's an independent, profit-making business set up to generate money for the government, British government. But there is, on the Windsor Estate, an understanding between the Crown Estate and the royal household that sometimes deals can be done to provide accommodation for members of the royal family. So I think I'm right in saying that Edward and Sophie, the new Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, live in a Crown Estate-owned property, Bagshot Park. And Andrew's house too is the freehold is owned by the Crown Estate on a 75-year lease. When he took over that house, he took it over on the understanding that he would pay for some major renovation work that needed to be done and to maintain it. So I think he spent about £7.5 million doing it up when he moved in, if I remember rightly. And the question is whether he's got the money now to do it. I've spoken to Ingrid Seward, for example, who long-time royal observer, royal biographer, editor-in-chief, Majesty magazine, who cannot believe that Andrew didn't inherit at least some money in a trust fund from his mother. And similarly, a chap who is writing a biography of Andrew and Fergie, I was speaking to him last week, Andrew Lowney, and he again thinks that Andrew is, doing quite well again now. But there doesn't seem to be much evidence of it because the house is by all accounts, looking a bit dilapidated. Another bit of colour is that I think there used to be 3 gardeners, and that's down to 1 gardener, from what I understand. And that house stands in 98 acres of land. And I think while the land immediately around the house is still looking quite spick and span, other parts of the grounds apparently have gone to rack and ruins. So
what about,
Andrew is not, sorry, go on.
He obviously lives with his ex-wife. Does she not have any money, coming into the pot?
Yeah, I think she's doing quite well at the moment. She's just been on a round of interviews in both Britain and the US to promote a new book she's got. She's bought her house in London. She and Andrew sort of sold their ski chalet that they bought jointly in Switzerland. So they should, in theory, have some money. So, but how much is the big question? And from what I can see, there is some heavy lobbying going on behind the scenes, and using these leaks via Daphne Barak to try to put pressure on the king for him to essentially look after his brother. And clearly, the king, has let it be known that he will not leave Andrew homeless or penniless, but he doesn't want to shell out the sort of large sums of money that Andrew is looking for, I think. So who knows how this is all going to turn out.
Yeah, and of course, this I can imagine is causing quite a divide between siblings as well.
Yeah, well, one would imagine that there are tensions. I mean, they have previously denied tensions on a few occasions when it's been reported that they'd fallen out. But it's a really tricky issue, and at the root of it all is what does Prince Andrew do? What with the rest of his life? What should be done with him? Personally, I think there is no room for him in public life whatsoever. And clearly, if he gets involved in anything controversial business-wise, then that is going to reflect badly on the royal family, on the monarchy. But he has to do something, and a lot of people have speculated that he would follow the example of, for example, John Profumo, the former British Defence Minister, who was caught up in the sex scandal in the early 60s, and devoted the rest of his life to charity, working at a pretty low level behind the scenes. But that just doesn't seem to be what Andrew is looking for. He seems to want something a bit more high profile.
I mean, do you genuinely think that he thinks people would buy his memoir, given the ongoing case, which was only closed, was it last year, Richard? Time escapes me.
Yes, there was an out-of-court settlement last year, the early part of last year, in time for the Jubilee, to make sure that it didn't overshadow the Jubilee. And Andrew seems to be telling friends that he's made a mistake in doing that. He tried to do the best for the monarchy, for his mother and for his brother, and make sure that it wasn't dominating the headlines. And then he's essentially complaining that he's been cut adrift. As I say, I think I could just about see him writing a memoir, and as with Harry's, it might sell really well. It wouldn't do the monarchy any favours. I doubt it would do Andrew any favours. It's also been suggested by my colleagues over at the Mirror that the Duke of York might be willing to do a television interview to help facilitate his return to public life. And again, I find that well, I find that even more difficult to believe. You couldn't rule it out, I suppose, particularly if there was a friendly interviewer. I mean, Daphne Barrack, for example, has done an interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, and he's clearly friendly. So perhaps Andrew might think it would, the outcome wouldn't be as bad as it was when he decided to do that BBC Panorama interview.
I mean, would he need the King's approval on this before he just goes ahead and goes ahead with these, prospective interviews? Would he need it because he's not, a working senior royal now?
Well, no, I don't think he would. Pandora, I've just realised. Would it be better if I went landscape? Let's try that.
Yes, give it a go, Richard. Give it a go. There we go.
Sorry. How stupid of me.
It's all right.
I mean, I do video. I am the world's worst photographer, but I do video all the time. And, the first thing I learnt in the first few days of ever doing it, 10 years or so ago, maybe 12 years ago, was it's got to be landscape, not portrait. Apologies for that.
At least we got there halfway through. I didn't want to interrupt what you were saying, but no, we got there now. It's always fun on the Royal Roundup. You never quite know what's coming.
I tell you what, my arm is getting heavy. I'm holding this phone up like this.
Well, tell you what, Richard, we'll take this to the poll then whilst you swap arms on the poll on the Prince Andrew's memoir, please, and see whether you would buy it at home. So let's take a look. Would you buy Prince Andrew's memoir if he released one? No, 90%. 10% or thereabouts. Richard, you've seen obviously the popularity of Prince Andrew plummet in these past few years. Are you surprised by this poll?
I'm not surprised by it, but of course, as we said, we had a very similar poll before Harry's memoir was published.
Yes,
and made the point that if 8.8% of the British public and others, around the world bought it, that would be a huge number of people. And indeed, we've seen Harry's memoir become an international bestseller. So even though many people would say they're not interested, that sort of percentage might bring in some healthy profits for him. I was going to say, my gut feeling is still that he won't end up writing a memoir and he won't end up appearing on TV ever again for a proper sit-down interview. But I wouldn't like to stake my life on it.
No, perhaps not. We'll replay this tape if he does, Richard. Okay, fine. Well, that's Andrew's memoir. Thank you for your comments on it. Lots of comments about, it'll all be about me, myself, and I. Well, I guess it is his memoir. So if it wasn't going to be about that, then when would it be? And we do love to hear from you guys. So keep them coming. We're going to be talking about the latest now on the coronation as it creeps ever closer, and it really is quite creeping closer. It was already the middle of March. It's crazy. So what is the latest on the communications between Harry and Meghan for the coronation, Richard? Obviously, we knew that there was email correspondence between them, but that's about as far as we got. Is there anything else on this?
I think this could be quite a short segment. No, not really. I mean, I think we know that they've been invited. We know that they haven't given a decision yet. We also know that Buckingham Palace, the royal household, is planning for them to be there, Harry and Meghan. But you would do, wouldn't you, if you've issued they haven't actually formally issued invitations, but they've sent out save the dates, and certainly in the case of Harry and Meghan, it's slightly different from heads of government and other people because the invitation, the conversation has been a private matter between the King's office and them. But we know that the palace is planning for their transport movements, places at dinner, things like that. But of course, these are just contingency plans. And my feeling is that even if they at this stage said we've decided we're not going to come, and they then decided at the last minute that they were going to come, then arrangements would be made to allow them to come, because I do still think that in spite of everything that's gone on, the King would like them to be there. But the other thing that has been doing the rounds a little bit is the question of whether the children will go. And Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, as we must now call them, have not formally been invited. But I don't think you should read too much into that, and that's for two reasons. First of all, it obviously depends on the parents. If the parents say they're coming, then I think royal sources have made it pretty clear that there can then be a conversation about whether they want to bring their children. But I think the second thing to say is that I suppose the assumption has been, well, they probably won't want to bring them because they're so young, and it's quite a long ceremony to sit through. They'd probably be there for at least a couple of hours in Westminster Abbey. And let's be honest, although they do have quite high positions in the line of succession, they're never going to be involved in the day-to-day official business of the royal family. So I think I guess the assumption has been so far that they won't come. But I think royal sources have made it clear that it's not a question of them not being invited. It's just that assumption being made. And well, let's wait and hear if the parents want to come first of all, and then we can have a conversation about the children.
And I was
just going to say one option is that I suppose children can come for a part of the ceremony. I believe I'm right in saying that the then Prince Charles was taken to part of his mother's coronation, but not. I don't think the whole ceremony, which went on for hours. So again, I suppose that might be an option as well.
Yeah, it potentially could be, but I suppose Lilibet hasn't met, I imagine. Has she met any of William and Kate's children, which I suppose would be her cousin?
We don't believe so. There doesn't appear to have been an opportunity for them to do that.
No.
They did have a party at Frogmore Cottage while they were back for the Jubilee, but as far as we know, William and Kate's children didn't go to that.
No. So I mean, that would also be that would be a huge step. But in terms of William and Harry, they've also take the children away and the wives away from this. They've obviously got talks for themselves to have as well at some point, I imagine, which would have to happen too. So lots hanging on this coronation. I think we took this to a poll as well. We asked you guys about Harry and Meghan for the coronation. So let's have a look. Do you think we will see Harry and Meghan at the coronation? We wanted to know your guesses on this. No, 63%. Yes, 37%. So a big chunk of you think that we won't see them, but obviously we've had the news about the prince and princess titles. Your guess is that we will see them, Richard. Am I right in thinking?
It's been my guess all the way along, although my my faith in my own judgment was slightly shaken when it transpired that they'd effectively been kicked out of Frogmore Cottage. That did surprise. So,
well, obviously, also I imagine they'll want to see it for the last time. I know if I was moving out of somewhere, which I use for a couple of weeks in a year, I'd definitely want to see if I'd left anything behind. That's for sure. But I suppose it works differently when you're royals, doesn't it? Okay, we're going to move on now onto a story which may seem a little old to you now, Richard, but we didn't discuss it on the last Royal Roundup, and it has happened since. So, the King's first Commonwealth Day service as monarch, it seemed to go to plan.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that old. It was only Monday, so...
It's been a long week.
Well, it has been a long week. Yes, yeah. It was... it was a very, it's always such a pleasure to go to Westminster Abbey. And, I think in this job, you can get quite blasé about things. But I mean, the Abbey is just absolutely stunning. And it was a lovely service. The highlight, I think, was the National Ballet from Rwanda, who put on a fantastic performance.
Wow.
We saw the senior royals, as they now are, the senior working royals, out in force for that. Edward and Sophie, the new Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Sophie was quite playful, and there was a nice little bit of footage that was caught of her sort of giving the king a bit of a shove in the shoulder, just joshing around. I have to say, one of the things that did surprise me, given that it was the King's first Commonwealth service, was the British government didn't really have. Normally you would expect the Prime Minister to be there and the Leader of the Opposition. Mm-hmm. I can remember, for example, when Jeremy Corbyn didn't go when he was Leader of the Opposition, and there was quite a big hoo-ha about that. But there was no Keir Starmer, and there was no Rishi Sunak. He was in California, I think, announcing a joint defence deal with Australia and the US. And I'm not sure where Keir Starmer was. The Labour Party, the opposition, was represented by the leader in the House of Lords, if I remember rightly, and Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, was the most senior British minister there. The big thing about that day, I suppose, was the King giving his first Commonwealth message and actually delivering it in person. And nobody at the palace could, the problem with the reign of Queen Elizabeth II is it lasted so long that nobody has been around that long to be sure. But as far as anybody at the palace could tell, this was the first time it had been delivered in person by the monarch. The Queen used to record it, an audio message, or it might have been a video message a couple of times, and it was played out in the Abbey and across the Commonwealth at various events. But the King delivered it from the pulpit in the Abbey and really set out his personal commitment to the Commonwealth. And for me, one of the interesting things about that was he spoke about climate change and the need to unite to combat climate change and to build a more sustainable future. And he was using language very similar to the language that he used when he was Prince of Wales, when he was a little bit freer to speak about these things. And that Commonwealth message is a rare opportunity for the monarch to speak personally rather than to deliver a message that has been vetted by the British government or the government of whichever Commonwealth nation they might be visiting. So it was an interesting day. There were protests outside, as we come to expect from these days, from any major royal event. Republic, the anti-monarchy group, was there. I think there were 15 or 20 of them there. I think. I mean, they were across the road, so they didn't get that close to the royal party. There were also people protesting about Cameroon, and there were protesters, I think, complaining about the King's involvement again with the World Economic Forum. And there's this group that think he's part of some sort of globalist conspiracy, doing down ordinary people. And so I think there were a small number of people for complaining about that as well. But yeah, it all went off pretty smoothly, I think. And then in the evening, there used to be, normally there has been a reception at Marlborough House, the Commonwealth headquarters, for Commonwealth representatives, but they did it at Buckingham Palace this time. And more or less the same royals were there, with the exception of the Princess of Wales, Kate. And there was a bit of online commentary about that. Essentially, what the palace said was it was a mistake, that they had announced that she was going to be there, but she was never actually supposed to be there. Right. So there was also speculation that one of the children was ill, or she was tired, or whatever. And I think it was just, as far as we can tell, a straightforward administrative error that they did. You know, she was said to be going when she was never planning to.
Right. Okay, then. Well, that's the latest. As you can tell, Richard always says, and I do reiterate on the Royal Roundup, we do try and keep things balanced. So you've got to thank you there, Richard, for reporting on the protesters. We've commented on them a few times on the Royal Roundup, but yes, it's good to have a full scope of what is actually on within it. Now, Richard, you've seen Charles over the years. Do you think he's really come into this role as monarch now? Is he really finding his feet from when, you know, the awful news of his late mother passed? Obviously, he had to deal with that, and also deal with obviously his new role. So, do you think he is finding his feet now? You know, making these public speeches, etc.
Yes, I think he is. I mean, I think it was an extremely smooth transition in the first place. It was smoother than I imagined, and there was an outpouring of grief at the passing of the Queen, but also an outpouring of loyalty towards the new monarch. And I think he's ridden on the back of that for a long time. I think he's run into a few controversies lately. The main one was, I think we discussed the other week, when he was, he appeared to have been used by Rishi Sunak to try to sell a new deal over Northern Ireland. But I think in general, he settled in really well. And what I've been interested in is, are we seeing a new style of monarchy? And I think it is early days, and I think there have been some subtle changes. And, oh God, I've had some grief online about this. You can't win as any type of journalist, you get criticism from all sides. And I've had some criticism, some of it quite personal, quite abusive, from, I suppose, what I call arch monarchy fans who didn't like the fact that I was suggesting that this was a slightly more activist monarchy, and I'm, I do think I see signs of that. They are very subtle changes, but I just think the monarchy has moved on from the sort of cliche, where people used to have the Queen saying, have you come far, while opening a hospital, cutting a ribbon somewhere. And I just think this is a more hands-on, active monarchy that is trying to act as a force for national unity in a way that perhaps the reign of Queen Elizabeth II didn't. So, for example, this week, yesterday, we saw the King out meeting members of the Sudanese community in the UK, in central London, and marking the 20th anniversary of the Darfur conflict. And the idea behind that, I suppose, was to bring unity to the Sudanese here, to heal divisions within the community there, but also not hardly a week goes by, certainly not a month goes by, without an engagement that is devoted to one or more religious or ethnic minority group. And I think the King, I wrote a big piece about this, and reflected the views of constitutional experts, constitutional academics, who think that the King has stayed on the right side of what a constitutional monarch should do. He's not being an interfering monarch in that sense, not getting involved in party political controversies. But there are more of these engagements. Going to food banks, going to all sorts of things that the cost of living is paramount in what the royal family is doing at the moment, the cost of living crisis. And there is political controversy over that, of course. You've got Lee Anderson, deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, who has suggested that lots of people who use food banks don't actually need them. But I would say in the mainstream, even though he's deputy chairman of the governing party, I would say that there is a consensus that we are all being hit by the cost of living crisis. And so I think every member of the royal family just about has been out to food banks to show support for what they are doing in helping the neediest in our society.
And I guess that's not political. That's talking about the things that he actually wants to talk about and stuff that he actually, is passionate about. And I guess that is, I suppose comes from the heart, because this has been something that he's been doing for years.
Yes, I think what would be party political, what would be overstretching the mark would be if he started to say that the reason we have food banks at the moment is because the government of the day isn't doing something that it should be doing.
And do you think he wants to do that, Richard? In your mind, do you think there is part of him that would love to get a little bit more political, but always has known that can't be the case?
I think he he's on record as saying that he recognised that the role of King is a different role to being Prince of Wales. So I think he's fully on board for that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's the latest then from Richard with all those online comments. Hopefully that has cleared things up for you. To look on to the rest of the week, Richard, you said just before we came live, it's looking a little bit quiet, but to give a bit of an indicator as to what the headlines will be over the next few days, touch wood, nothing breaks overnight. What's that going to look like then on the royal front?
Well, tomorrow we've got the Prince and Princess of Wales going to Aldershot to see the Irish Guards. Prince William is the outgoing colonel and Kate is the incoming colonel. So that's always a colourful occasion. Lovely pictures and yeah, a bit of light relief on the news agenda after a week sort of dominated by the budget. But then we've also got a court case coming up tomorrow, High Court, Prince Harry against the Daily Mail, and I'll be down at court covering that. So I'm not quite sure what that's going to entail yet, but
we shall see.
I think it's going to take up most of my day. Yes. Excuse me. And then there are things coming up next week, but a lot of them haven't been announced yet. So I can't really talk about things that aren't sort of in the public domain.
So under embargo, Richard, under embargo. Okay, good. All right. Well, whilst you go grab some water, I think that brings to a close the Royal Roundup today. Lots to discuss about Prince Andrew, the coronation, Commonwealth, all sorts. So if you want to catch up with all the latest Royal Roundup episodes, you can go over onto our YouTube channel where we premiere every single Friday on there at 4 p.m. So if you're watching on catch up, hello. Also catch up on our Facebook playlist, over on our Instagram as well. We put all of the stories which are exclusive lines off the back of the Royal Roundup on there, as well as on our Facebook. And if you're watching on Twitter, hello. That is all we have for this week. We'll be back hopefully the same time next week on Thursday at 2 p.m. Bar anything else happening at that time, Richard, we will definitely confirm for you guys, though, on there. You can catch Royal Reporter Richard on Twitter for all of the latest lines. I'm sure there'll be some beautiful pictures coming out tomorrow. As you said, I can imagine that will hit a few of the papers as well as ours, obviously, Richard. Okay, then, Richard, thank you. And we will catch you next week.